loves to watch. She loves to watch. She loves to watch.
Okay, hi, I'm Art Fein. This is Little Art's Poker Party, coming to you from Hollywood on a beautiful day in August, is it? Yeah, 1988. Special show devoted to Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, the SMILEl album. Can you see that over there? I got some panel of experts to tell me about it. Let me introduce my first expert. I got Paul Williams. Paul, it's a groove to see you. Weren't you in the Temptations?
Oh yeah, I was, but
you do the
I
deep voice?
killed myself.
There was a Paul Williams,
Yes.
Besides the little guy that we know about that's a singer.
The guy in the Temptations shot himself in a car long time ago.
Is that right?
There's been a few others. There's a movie director.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
You're not the songwriter then who writes all those great songs like for the Muppets?
He does my TV usually, but this is an exception. Especially for Art, I agreed to come on.
Okay.
In this incarnation?
Yeah.
This is one of Paul's books, the latest. It talks about, what does it talk about?
Rediscovering rock and roll.
So it's for people like myself who have been out of it chronically for 20 years?
Yeah, it's for those of us who were tremendously into it at one point or another, and are wondering if there's still something going on, and if there is something going on, am I too old to relate to it or not, and what would happen, if I jump back in with both feet?
Because you're a longtime rock chronicler. I mean, you've been from the beginning, really, right? What was your slot with Crawdaddy?
Well, certainly it's not the beginning of rock and roll, but Crawdaddy, which I started when I was a teenager and a college student, was the first American rock and roll magazine. So and that was like January of '66. So I had a great ride. I mean, I got to be part of the scene at a really exciting time, basically '66 through '68, '69, that period.
And that's about how long you wrote it?
That's how long I was really actively involved in writing about rock and roll. There were, other periods since then when I've done some of it, but primarily my book Outlaw Blues and
Outlaw Blues.
my time with Crawdaddy as the editor and so forth runs '66 to '68.
Okay, well, we're going to get into the stuff you did in 1966 with Brian Wilson and the great missing album, SMILEl, in just a minute. Let's introduce David Leaf. David.
Hello, Art.
Hey, it's a groove to see you. Did you wear that shirt so you'd stand out, like everybody would notice you?
Well, it's California, it's blue, it's the ocean.
Well, it's a good way to one-up the guys on the other side because you really got a vivacious look.
Oh, that's good.
I think you're really outstanding today. And this is David's book about the Beach Boys. This is the reissue or second pressing.
Second edition, revised, of The Beach Boys and the California Myth, which came out in 1978, and this edition came out in 1985.
So, okay, we'll talk about that in a second. So what else? I mean, and you write and you...
Primarily I work in television. Right now there's a writer's strike going on, so for the last 6 months I've been working over at Warner Brothers Records, helping coordinate activities surrounding Brian Wilson's album, which everybody watching the show should have bought by now.
Right, absolutely. Well, welcome to the show, David. You've been standing to the sides before watching, but you've never been on. Dominic's been on once. Domenic Priore.
Once and a half.
Once and a half? Oh, that's right. You were on one show where we talked about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys for a half hour, and you were on another show talking to Brian Wilson for about a minute.
That's right.
Well, let's see. Dominic's claim to fame, among others. I mean, one of many. Surfing Colors Productions, of course, is what you know him for mostly.
Yes.
But he also puts out this little tome about. This one's about SMILEl particularly, but basically, when he's put out stuff in the past, it's been about Brian Wilson and
surf music.
And surf music.
Phil
and
Spector.
Phil Spector, things of that ilk. Now, this supposedly is. How many pages is this?
I think 263.
263 pages, many of which are reprints of articles. And
That's right.
right.
I can't take myself to blame. I can blame Paul and David, and they added to the book too.
Oh, there's articles in there by these guys.
That's right.
All taken without permission and with no, right.
no substance.
No royalties.
No money.
No money. But these guys are great.
If we can now follow this finger, if you could look at this album cover for a second, it's not an album cover you see in the stores anywhere, because there's no such album. Maybe you could tell me a little about this is the Beach Boy album SMILEl, which was to come out after Pet Sounds.
Right. What was your line on Pet Sounds that David was talking about earlier,
Oh.
by the way?
Oh, because I'm a latecomer to the Brian camp. I'm a latecomer to digging the Brian Wilson sound. So that I heard my first album that I really listened to in depth was the new Brian Wilson album. Then you gave me Pet Sounds to listen to, and I said, that's nice, but it's just kind of the roots of the new Brian album. That's the way I look at
Wow.
it. You know, that it's a nice warm-up, but
Yeah.
this is the album.
That's
you know.
great.
Wow, that's brilliant to say.
No, it's stupid, actually.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. You know,
Stupidly brilliant.
Yeah.
You can be both at the same time.
well, what SMILEl was the follow-up to Pet Sounds, which, if it, as we all know, if it would have came out in 1966 or early '67, would have blown some minds. Good Vibrations was the first single from it, which obviously did blow a lot of minds. And following that up would have been Heroes and Villains and the SMILE album, which was just an amazing piece. Pre-Sgt. Pepper, post-Revolver, a very crucial time in rock and roll history, I'd say.
Now, I, as a layman, sort of watching the Beach Boys, as, well, I like, that's Good Vibration, that's a good song.
Yeah.
I remember I went out, I already owned All Summer Long, that album.
Good
And
album.
then I didn't buy anything else. And then when Good Vibrations came out, I did buy Smiley Smile, and I said, I don't know. It's got
Yeah.
these vegetable songs and stuff. This is all very kind of fun, but you know,
Yeah.
it didn't really matter much to me. Now, if I'd been smart, I would have bought this album if it was available, right?
Well, it wasn't up to your being smart or not. It just wasn't available because of problems that happened at the time. But the music that was recorded for it exists. Most of it is you know, there's hours of it. How many hours of it,
Well,
David?
well David,
countless hours.
you've heard.
In the last 6 months, Capitol Records has launched an exercise through the archives trying to determine exactly what exists in terms of SMILE. And Mark Lynette, who was the engineer on Brian's solo album, and Andy Paley, who worked closely with Brian on this album, collaborated on several of the songs, and worked co-produced part of the album with Brian. And I have had a chance to go through the archives and listen to the material, and there are indeed hours and hours of fascinating music, most of which is unfinished in one form or another, ranging from basic piano demo all the way to an almost finished track that hasn't quite been pieced together. And hopefully, at some time in the not too distant future, all of this will coalesce into a multi-CD project that will come out under the title The SMILE Era or The SMILE Sessions.
Sessions, yeah,
Sessions,
Smile
yeah.
Sessions.
Something like
yeah, that
that,
would
Yeah,
be good.
Smile Sessions sounds great.
Because what we have, what we can listen to is, as an artist, Brian Wilson, at the peak of his powers, traveling off into a new dimension, taking pop music into a revolutionary era. And that's really where Paul comes in, because Paul was the first person to chronicle this activity that was going on in Los Angeles at a time when Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys were considered incredibly unhip. This was pre-Good Vibrations and post all the surfing and car hits, and people kind of looked down at the Beach Boys. Not that they were right or
trivial
wrong to,
pop
but,
music stuff,
but,
yeah,
it
lightweight.
wasn't relevant in light of Bob Dylan and all of that.
Well, Paul, I mean, what you said was that you formed Crawdaddy in 1966, even as a very small sheet. But I
Yeah.
guess that made you totally a pioneering guy, because the Rolling Stone impact wasn't until 2 years later. So for
Yeah.
anybody, just the idea of chronicling the movement of rock music was unique. So how did that have an impact on you? You came down here from the north, from
No, I was
Northern
living at the time, when I was doing Crawdaddy, I was first in Boston and then in New York City. And actually, my first visit to California in my life was in December of 1966, when I met Brian Wilson and hung out at his house and at their recording sessions for several days.
At whose urging was this? Were you writing to him and saying, gee, I'd really like to see your sessions? Or were they saying,
I
here's
guess
a cool guy?
I had already established myself as a Beach Boys fan. I mean, as David says, I've been writing in the magazine about how great Pet Sounds and the other things that they've been putting out were. And I don't know, it was a guy named Michael Vossi brought me up to Brian's house, and he was one of the people involved in the scene at the time, and I don't even remember how that happened. It was just something I wanted to do, and you know.
The key player in '66 was Derek Taylor. And
Yeah, I'm sure it was through Derek, actually.
Now, he was the Beatles publicist, I know.
Right.
Was
Has
he
been
first?
over the years.